How can I take this modest little materials with no budget and make something out of it? And I knew that the only thing that I had to my advantage, I didn't have a lot of money. The only thing I did have was time. Hi, my name's Fu-Tung Cheng. I have a company called Cheng Design in Berkeley, California. I've been working as an architectural designer for the last 35 years or so, 40 years. I got my original training at UC Berkeley and also UCLA in fine art. The evolution of how I got into design work and designing, especially designing houses, was really from the ground up, literally. It's from working on houses as a contractor, building, and then trying to incorporate somewhat of my fine art background and the idea of creativity and using whatever you can at the moment. Began doing all those things. I gradually evolved and got a contractor's license. And once I managed to cobble together a tiny bit of savings, managed to buy this old wreck of a house, and I'm talking to you from that house right now. This has been my sort of laboratory to accomplish the things that I've managed to do in my outside work as an architectural designer now. Gradually, year after year after year of doing small things, it progressed into focusing on kitchens. The kitchen in my house, for example, is where I first got started with the idea of, let's try using concrete here and make a landscape out of a countertop so that it functions with drain boards and sliding relief edges for cutting boards. All the things that would function almost like a lab sink, but then make it an aesthetic piece, make it something that had a presence in a kitchen. So I did this about 35, 40 years ago and started with this little ramshackle house that I managed to purchase and worked on it slowly, just piece by piece, little by little. One thing that drove my intention was the idea of sustainability. And this was in the early 70s. So I had very much been influenced, of course, by the movement, the ecological movement, environmental movement that had beginning to take place in Berkeley especially. And I thought, okay, I have this ramshackle house. I don't have a job. What can I do? How can I build something? And it just occurred to me that the only thing I could do was to salvage as much as I could, get things for free, and try to put together a house that slowly over time would exhibit the kind of designs that I would see in Frank Lloyd Wright or Gaudí, or all the things I studied in art school. And I did want quality. So the only way I could get that quality is to take time. And so piece by piece, I did little portions of this house. At the same time, I was designing the windows that you see in this house using reclaimed wood, even the glass that I salvaged from the dump yard, recut. All the things that I had were piece by piece organically introduced over a time period of nearly 50 years. When I was driving around in my little Vespa motor scooter around town, look at abandoned buildings, industrial buildings that were changing, I would ask, I'd say, do you want those industrial windows, those steel windows? No, we're throwing them out. And so I would take these steel frame windows and carefully take out the glass and clean them up and reglaze them. And those became my windows in the rear of the house. And I salvaged enough of them that as I did one section and the design evolved and I thought, okay, maybe I should expand this room a little bit, I was able to use those same windows and have them intersect with each other both internally and externally to keep a consistency so it doesn't look like just a hodgepodge of steel frame windows just placed here and there. And yet, at the same time, it isn't something that is drafted from the very get-go to line up perfectly with everything else. That kind of evolution of material happened everywhere. So this floor, for example, is a gymnasium floor from the local junior high school that was torn down. These beams that you see here, everywhere, all the beams are salvaged lumber. Some of the joists and some of the sheathing on the roof that I used on the edge of the house, all those came from Treasure Island in San Francisco Bay when they were tearing out the naval base. So on the outside of this house are some large planks. They're about 16 to 18 inches wide, pure redwood from the original forests that were in California. And the way I could tell was that the grain structure is so fine that these trees are at least 1,000 years old. I salvaged these myself from a ceiling in a storefront in Oakland that was being torn out. To my surprise, I found these planks that were 24 inches wide, which is unheard of, and they were about 1.25 inches thick. And they just don't make that kind of lumber anymore, that dimension. They weren't warped at all. It was because they were all vertical grain. And what I did was I replaned them by hand and sanded them and then clad my house in the front. In being a designer and working for clients and working on larger projects, they're very intense and they're very involved. When you come back home, it's not exactly, the first thing you want to do is to put on your tool belt and start working again. To my wife's credit, she's been so patient over the years, and I did express to her and kind of promise that I would transform the front yard. I decided, okay, I'll build you a little garden and I'll put a gate in the front. And she was very happy. A plan began to take shape with a wall, and I thought, let's make that wall really interesting. Let's make it alive. I said, I've always wanted a little pond. I love koi fish. decided needed something really special as a gate. And I've always loved moon doors, Chinese moon doors, and the idea of walking through a circle, of having that grand entrance feel. So I designed a moon door, and it was one made out of concrete, steel, and copper. And I said, I'll do it for your birthday. And so 10 years went by before she could open her present, or the gate to her present. It wasn't out of neglect, it was out of that sometimes to do your own design work on your own place is the hardest thing. In this house, it's somewhat eclectic, and I hope that there's a theme that runs through it, is that this house is a little bit more than the sum of its parts. I mean, now more than ever, since I've been building, I see more waste than ever before. Every construction job site, you can go there at certain periods of time, and there's materials available. If you have the time, and you take your time and thoughtfully use those materials, you can build something amazing.
For more insightful videos on design, subscribe to Design Will Save the World.
This is what I did when I was 20 at UC Berkeley. That was my sophomore year in Berkeley.